Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks, Tony, for singing that song. You took me back into time. I may have mentioned it before. That was the first song that Mr. Shazo taught us in the first grade at Emmanuel Lutheran School in Hampton, Virginia. I hear that song and I'm in that classroom. I can see it. I can see her. I can see all my friends. I hear us singing that song. It's the fall of 1957 all over again. And I cannot separate that song from that memory. Music is a wonderful thing. Tonight we want to continue our series of lessons on the book of Esther that we've entitled Death, Destiny, and Deliverance. The faith of Mordecai and Esther in the crucible. You want to talk about the rock and a hard place. These two were in the rock and the hard place, if there ever were, because it looked like things were going to end. Not just some things, but everything. It looked like every Jew in the empire, the whole world at that time, was going to die on a certain day. And these two are standing in the gap, working to make sure that doesn't happen. And so tonight we want to entitle our lesson tonight in that series, Prepositioned Saints. Prepositioned Saints. God He's not doing things randomly or by accident. God has never, ever said, oops, not in his vocabulary. God has never said, I didn't see that coming. He's planned it all out from before the beginning of time. And the fact that Mordecai and Esther are prepositioned in Susa to stop the greatest conspiracy in history. Now, a lot of times today we kind of joke about people who are conspiracy theorists. Well, there are such things as conspiracies.
Yep.
And this is the greatest one of all. One man, Haman, has conspired to destroy a whole nation of people and wipe them out in one day with no survivors. That's his plan. It's going to be thwarted, but that's later. But to stop evil Haman, God has prepositioned two people in the worldwide empire of Xerxes I, the most powerful man that had ever lived up to that time. Now, how in the world are two people, two Jews, two slaves, going to do such a thing? How are these two going to stop what Haman has designed against God's people? Well, we want to look tonight at the prepositioning of God's people. I would like to call your attention now to the book of Esther. We want to look at chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Esther 2, 1 through 11. After these things, when the anger of King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus, had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's young men who attended him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel, under custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given them, and let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This pleased the king, and he did so. Now, there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is, Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Haggai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put into custody of Haggai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman pleased him and won his favor, and he quickly provided her with cosmetics and her portion of food, with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. Things are moving rapidly as God is pre-positioning his saints to do his will, to stand in the gap for the entire nation so that they might live. And so, as we know, Messiah might come to the world. So, who was this Xerxes? We've talked about him some, but Xerxes was the son of Darius the Great. And his wife, Atosa, was the daughter of Cyrus the Great, the founder of Persia, the Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Achaemenid,
Yeah. Empire. We're not talking about just anybody here. This guy comes from total royalty on both sides of the family. He is numero uno without question. And the Bible has talked to us already about the party of parties, how Vashti had refused his order. She's been deposed. And now the king has had some time to calm down and reflect on what's going on. The anger has subsided, so he begins to think about what to do now. What to do now. So after his anger is past, he remembers everything that Vashti had done and what had been done against her. Now, history doesn't tell us, the Bible doesn't tell us what happened to Vashti. Now, she was either exiled or executed. We don't know. But one thing is for sure, she's no longer queen and banned from ever seeing or talking to the king ever again. And so he's thought about all these things. And then it's interesting what he's doing here. The king listens to his young men advisors. Reminds me of Rehoboam after Solomon's death.
Oh boy.
The people come and say, hey, you know, your dad was a little hard on us. Can you ease up? So he talks to the old men who say, yeah, you need to ease up. Your dad was a real pain. And then the young man says, nah, you need to double down on all this. You need to show them that old dad was nothing compared to you. That you're going to make things much worse. So he takes that advice and destroys his kingdom. It's taken away. 10 of the 12 tribes are taken away from him. And here's old King Xerxes listening to his young men advisors. And man, they've concocted a plan. And what a plan it is. You want to talk about spending government money. Wow, these guys have come up with a plan. They've come up with a plan. So they say to the king, well, you need to look around the citadel and all the government and locate all the most beautiful virgin women that you can find here in Susa. And they say, not only that, you need to appoint a judge in every province in the kingdom.
All 127 of them.
Yes. To search in their provinces for the most beautiful young virgin women they can find and send them down to the citadel in Susa. Now, you want to talk about competition. 127 guys competing with one another to come up with the most number of the most beautiful women in the province to the beauty contest of beauty contests. We're talking about maybe hundreds of thousands of women coming to Susa to be judged by the king, and only one is going to be chosen queen. And it's really quite a thing. Now, once in Susa, all these beautiful women are going to be put in what we call a harem or a harem. I just can't imagine how large a facility they had to have to house all these women. In our day and time, every hotel would be booked within 100 miles of Charlotte to house all these women.
And then some.
And then some, yeah. So it's really quite the endeavor. And then you want to talk about stimulating the economy. All these women are going to be given all the best cosmetics that money can buy. Because, hey, after all, they're going to have to be judged by the king himself. There's no expense denied here. Whatever you need to spend, there's no holds barred. And if you were a stockholder in the cosmetic business in Susa in those days, you would see some very nice profit in your investment. Well, of course, this pleased the king. Like, how could it not please the king? I mean, you get to choose the most beautiful women among all the most beautiful women, and you alone are going to make the choice, and you get to choose the most beautiful one of them all. Well, as this is all being planned, we get to meet someone. We get to meet this man named Mordecai. Now, who is Mordecai? Well, he's an interesting person because he is a person of, shall we say, mid-level authority. He's not on the big radar, but he's no pushover either. He's sitting at the gate of the city, of the citadel of Susa. And it says that Mordecai was the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. What does that mean? It means that God was pre-positioning Mordecai in this place and in this time long before Mordecai himself shows up on the scene. You see, Babylon came in 586 and carried away this guy. This guy was a Benjaminite. Yeah, his Shimei, son of Kish, Benjamite. And uh, he had a son named Jair, and he had a son named Mordecai.
Mm-hmm.
So Mordecai's grandpa gets dragged off to Babylon. And so long before Mordecai comes on the scene, God is prepositioning him to be there. Again, this is no accident. And it's interesting how Mordecai and Esther are essentially uh, undercover. They're they're there, but no one notices them. And this is interesting how it all works out. And one of the things that's interesting about Mordecai and Esther are Persian names. They're not Persians, they're Jews. You see, one of the things that the Babylonians and then the Persians after them did to continue to enslave and humiliate and assimilate those of other nations, they made them speak only the Babylonian language, which later became known as Aramaic. And the other thing, they forced them to take foreign names. Now, how do we know this? If you uh, turn over to the book of Daniel, uh, chapter 1 and verse 7, we see exactly what's going on here, how the three young men of Judah were assimilated and their identity. The Babylonians attempted to steal their identity by renaming them different names. Listen to what the Bible says happened. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Hananiah, he was called Shadrach. And Mishael, he was called uh, uh, Meshka. And Azariah was called Abednego. So, what do you do to take away someone's identity? You force them to not use their own language and you give them different names and you force them to adopt different customs, cut their hair in different ways, wear different clothes. The idea is to blend them into the Babylonian and later the Persian culture. It was a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing to rob someone of their name. We see this so often in the annals of American slavery as well, that people were enslaved that had their names erased. And very few people know the names of their ancestors. So it was with Mordecai and Esther. Now, Mordecai was a Persian name. Now, we don't know what, according to the Bible, we don't know what Mordecai's Jewish or Hebrew name was. But according to the Talmud, a Jewish tradition says that his Hebrew name was Petachia, Petachyah. I couldn't find any reference to that in terms of what it might mean, but according to the Talmudic tradition, that was his name, Pedakiah, and his name was changed by the Persians to Mordecai, which means in Persian, dedicated to Marduk. Dedicated to Marduk. Well, Mordecai was dedicated. But he certainly wasn't dedicated to Marduk, but that was his official name. That's what he was called. I'm trying to think of what's the name of that TV show where the guy talks into his shoe. Back in the 50s and 60s. Help me out here.
Inspector.
Get smart. What was his name? He didn't. What was his name in the show? It was he? Did he have a number? What was it? But anyway, he had an alias, sort of like 007. So Pedakiah is Mordecai, but Mordecai is not Mordecai. He's Pedakiah. He's not Persian. He's a faithful follower of God. Now, Esther was a Persian name given to her to replace her Jewish name. The Bible tells us what her name was: Hadassah. Hadassah. And this might not seem attractive to us today, but her name meant myrtle tree. That was the meaning of her name, myrtle tree. And we might think, well, naming someone after a tree, what's that all about? Well, in Jewish tradition, the myrtle tree was associated with peace, love, and prosperity. So they told her, you're no longer Hadassah. You're going to be called Esther, which was Persian for star or Ishtar, the goddess, the star goddess of the Persians. And they were forced to use these pagan names, but they didn't identify themselves as pagans. They didn't identify themselves as Persians. They were God's people in exile, and they were determined to use their identities, whatever they might be, to stand in the gap for God's people. God has prepositioned Mordecai and Esther, or Pedakiah and Hadassah, into places where he will use them to do the impossible, to save a nation from a murdering bureaucrat. Okay, now Mordecai was a very, very important mid-level bureaucrat. He was important enough to have authority, but not important enough to be known by the, I'll use the technical terms, the muckety-mucks, the upper management. They weren't really aware of Mordecai, but if you had to gain access to the citadel at Susa, where the king and his court were, you had to go through the gate, and you had to show your real ID to TSA before you could go in. Little metaphor there, recent experience. So Mordecai, we don't know for sure what he was there doing. Later on, we know he had some kind of very important job, because he was able to overhear a conspiracy by a bunch of the king's higher ups that were conspiring to kill him. And so he later on saves the king's life by letting them know. So he's just not anybody just hanging out at the gate. He's not like just I don't have anything else to do. I'll then go to the gate and hang out. No, he's there for a purpose. So he was either an armed guard, perhaps, or he was one who was in charge of administrative access, sort of like a border guard. You have to show your visa, show your uh, credentials, your passport, what have you. You have to be checked out by this person, and they'll either give you access or deny you access. That's kind of the idea here. Um, uh, he was also perhaps an administrative judge for minor disputes, because in the ancient world, if two people had a dispute, they go to the city gate, and there would be somebody at the city gate who would adjudicate for them minor disputes. So maybe that's what Mordecai was doing. But regardless of what he was doing, he was a mid-level important person that people had to get by to get in some way or another. So he was very much like we were talking about this morning. He wasn't Esther's father, but he was fatherly towards her in every possible way. Every possible ways. He was, and the Bible speaks a little oddly here, but he was, verse 7 says, he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle. Now, who is the daughter of his uncle? Who is the daughter of my uncle? It's my cousin. Why doesn't it say cousin? That's what we're talking about here. But apparently, Mordecai was much older than Esther, even though they were cousins. Anybody here have a much older or a much younger cousin? Yeah.
Yes.
How many years difference there?
Well, my oldest cousin was born in 1974, and I was born in 1991.
That's a pretty good gap. That would be similar to Mordecai and Esther. Mordecai was a very mature, older adult, and Esther was a young woman, perhaps still a teenager. We don't know for sure her age. But what does he do? Well, the Bible says her parents are dead. And here is this incredibly beautiful young woman out on her own. And her cousin, her much older cousin, takes it upon himself to protect her in every way he can, up to and including adopting her as his own daughter. He's dedicated to taking care of Esther. Now, I've always assumed that, and incorrectly so, I think, I'll have to continue to look at this, but I'd always assumed that Mordecai kind of put Esther up to all this. But apparently not. We have to see what the Bible says. It says that Mordecai took her as his own daughter in verse 8. So the king's order and his edict were proclaimed. And when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Haggai, that's, you go in and you don't go out, you're in beauty jail. Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in the custody of Haggai, who had charge of the women. It doesn't sound like Mordecai had anything to say about it.
Nope.
She was essentially kidnapped and taken to the citadel to be in the harem in charge of this Haggai fellow, who was the king's chief eunuch, in charge of these women. And so it's not a good thing, or so it may seem. But we're talking about God here. God has prepositioned Mordecai to protect Esther, and he's prepositioned Esther to go into this harem and be God's woman among all these perhaps hundreds of thousands of women to stand in the gap for God's people. It's not possible for this to happen by itself. That one guy who adopts a young lady as cousin to protect her, and then while he's at the gate one day, he gets word that she's been kidnapped and taken into the harem. So I don't believe that Mordecai was in conspiracy to somehow get her in there on purpose. I could be wrong. I stand to be corrected if that's the case, but it looks to me like Mordecai, the last thing he wanted to do was to place her in danger on purpose. And we really need to stop and think about it. Esther undoubtedly was one of the most beautiful women ever to live. And as such, Mordecai was obsessed with protecting her from all the terrible things that could happen to a young, beautiful woman in that culture. And all the things that he wanted to protect her from were totally evil. He was sacrificing his life, his reputation, everything to take care of Esther in this situation.
So the Hebrew verb means was captured, was taken away, was taken, was removed. Yeah. She's basically passive in the whole ordeal.
Yeah. She's walking down the street and they say, wow, look at that one there. Grab her. I think that's what happened. So she needed this protection, and now Mordecai is mortified. She's inside the harem, and he's outside the harem, and every day he has to go by and check on her and see how she's doing, what's going on. He's just beside himself with care. But God is at work. You know, Esther does not just go into this harem without help. Mordecai is not in a position to help her at this moment. She's behind a wall in a compound of some sort. And he's on the outside. All he can do every day is walk by and see how she's doing.
The Hebrew verb for what he did is traverse or walk about.
Yeah. So he
sounds like a lot more than simple walking.
Yes, he's aggressively seeking information every day, apparently. But not to worry, Mordecai, God is in the harem with Esther. And he's doing things for her that no human could do. Can you imagine? They say that anything greater than 1 in 1,000 odds is considered impossible mathematically. But there's far more than 1,000 beautiful women in this compound. Far more.
It's like a lottery deal, basically.
Yeah. And God, we call it providence, but God is working to do something. He did some marvelous things for Esther to make sure that when the time came that King Xerxes the first, the greatest man on the earth, would choose her and reject all the others. That's mathematically impossible, but we remember what Jesus said, with God, nothing is impossible. So what are these impossible things that God does for Esther and by extension Mordecai, so the two of them later can save the people? Well, first of all, this guy Haggai, the chief eunuch. This is the guy that is in charge of all these women. And it says here that Esther, first of all, pleased him. Now, we don't know why. Obviously, it was something more than just looks, because everywhere he looked, he saw beautiful women. There was something about Esther, how she carried herself, how she presented herself, how she was showing attributes of God in this terrible circumstance. So she pleased him. Number two, more than that, she won his favor. She won his favor. We don't know how, but it was how she carried herself, what she said, what she didn't say. And she pleased him and won his favor. Number three, quickly he provided her with her cosmetics. Ring the bell. Oh boy, we've hit the lottery here, to use another metaphor. He gives her as much as she wants of the finest cosmetics on earth, above and beyond what any of the other women are receiving. And number four, he provided her a portion of food. Now, I've never eaten at a king's palace or any such thing like that, but can you imagine going to Windsor Palace and King Charles says, whatever you want, whatever's on the menu, you get what you want. And it would be amazing. The incredible food. That's what she's being given. And then, it's very interesting in the Bible about numbers, 7 meaning perfection and associated with God. Esther pleases the eunuch, finds favor with the eunuch, gets the best cosmetics from the eunuch, gets the best food from the eunuch, and now what does he do? He goes to the king's palace. Xerxes the first. He goes to the king's palace and he grabs 7 of the best servants he can find and gives them to Esther for them to wait on her. Now, that is going above and beyond, if there ever was going above and beyond. And he didn't stop there. He proactively, it says, advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Wow. That is a rocket sled to the top, if there ever was one. She didn't do anything. This is God's work. Because you can't, Mordecai is not in a position to make this happen. Nobody else is in a position to make it happen other than this Haggai guy. Well, what's in it for him? Well, nothing, except that he's doing what God has authorized him to do. He doesn't know it, but God is moving the chess pieces around because God is playing the long game. What is the long game God's playing? He's playing the Messiah is coming long game. And he's going to make sure that Haman is not going to kill all his people, and he's going to make sure that Mordecai and Esther stand in the gap for them and make sure. And I've gone on too long, and I apologize. So never think that God is not working, because he's at work 24/7. If anyone needs to speak about anything about their soul salvation, won't you come as we sing to encourage.
No 280. I have decided